What's up, everyone? In a insane turn of events today, I ended up finding a pretty random post that was about a darknet market that was basically really screwing up in terms of OpSec. The security screw up we typically see in darknet markets are relatively small and menial and typically can be adjusted to some degree and fixed with almost nobody knowing. Other times they can be massive and have really, really considerable effects, like, market takedowns from law enforcement, or a market gets broken into and ends up exit scamming because they were broken into. I think what's really interesting is the market that we're talking about today, which actually had neither one of those things happen to them yet. This isn't due to luck or like some other kind of whimsical thing, but rather because at this point, it doesn't really seem like anyone actually cares. The market that I'm talking about is called Helsinki Market. And for me, it was almost impossible to find anything by Googling it. There's virtually nothing out there on the ClearNet about this specific darknet market. In other words, it's a little nothing market that someone set up and, probably didn't know what they were actually doing. And this is obvious because there's virtually no PR, but even more so, it's obvious because there's really nothing going on at this market. The post on X contained a ridiculous amount of information. The only text in the post said, "This is not how you run a darknet market." This post was made by a person named DarkWebInformer. Over time, I've watched this particular X or Twitter account evolve from posting CTI or cyber threat intelligence about different companies and organizations that got hacked into, to posting on anything related to the darknet or InfoSec. The picture that was posted along with the post had a ton of different details in it, including the date that the discovery was apparently made, which was the 29th of June, or the same day that I'm actually recording this. It also had valuable information like the server type, the software that was running on the server, and the versions of software that was actually running. We could see that it was running Apache on a Unix system. It had SSL, PHP, Perl, and all versions of that software disclosed openly. All of this information is definitely worrisome if you're a darknet market admin trying to keep the site secure. However, the biggest piece of critical information that a market admin has to actually worry about is their IP address. The best way to think about this is if you're a criminal and say you're doing a bunch of illegal things, but nobody knows your actual name or your actual address. They simply know your alternate identity name, and that's it. The anonymity is what literally keeps you safe. Having the software and the version types exposed is a really big problem. The whole point of operational security is to keep your information secure from adversaries. In our analogy, if the type of, things you own, say the type of computer you bought gets made public, like a ThinkPad, it would help a resourceful adversary like the federal government to narrow down the scope of who could be responsible for these crimes. For example, if they knew that within the last year you purchased a ThinkPad directly from the manufacturer, they could pull the records of everyone who owned a ThinkPad and bought it from that manufacturer. And now, instead of the entire population of the world or the United States, it's only the customer list of the company that makes ThinkPads that they actually have to go through. And this is a really significant, smaller haystack with the needle in it than the original that they would actually have to go through. We're talking billions to maybe hundreds of thousands or tens of thousands. However, keep in mind, in this analogy, this still isn't your actual address, right? It's definitely limits the scope of what they would, have to go through, but it still doesn't give them the outright answer. So typically for sites like darknet markets, the most valuable piece of information that there is going to be the home address. with our analogy, which is actually the IP address. And in the case of computers, specifically with servers, it's an IP address, not a home address. The worst possible information to have out there is the server's IP address. The software it's running and the versions available to individuals, it makes it even worse. DarkWebInformer ended up running up, actually finding and disclosing this exact information in this particular situation. After learning about this, my first reaction was to share with the Darknet community, posting it on Dread and Pitch. Why? Because people like this who create markets with such horrific, vulnerabilities right off the bat are idiots and are, in fact, detrimental to the rest of the individuals who are seeking to be very legitimate in an illegal corner of the world. If, you get my whole analogy with that. The people who run this market most likely meet the classical definition that we would have for low-hanging fruits for law enforcement. I don't like to see anyone get arrested or go to prison, but at the same time, I can understand why DarkWebInformer posted on this very thing and posted it very publicly to X. To begin with, I think that in part posting this definitely helps many people. I think it helps individuals avoid a market that doesn't take operational security seriously, for one. And by doing that, jeopardizes everyone who ends up actually making an account on the site. In the past, DarkWebInformer and I have gone back and forth, even disagreeing so sharply that we severed communications. More accurately, he severed communications by blocking me, and a friend and a mutual third party reached out, and eventually cool heads prevailed, and we came together due to common cause interest, such as discussing matters related to the Darknet like this. When I talk about this kind of stuff, know that I'm talking about me and not really him. I can't speak for him directly or tell you his motives. Still, I can tell you that I enjoy a lot of the reporting that he does, even though many people on the Darknet tend to enjoy it a lot less. At this point, I already have multiple videos on, some of the other information that he's already sent me on additional subjects related to this kind of stuff. It's absolutely crazy to me that these kind of vulnerabilities are just out there in the wild, especially for a market that really hasn't really done anything. At the end of the day, if your market is like this and it has, it's still in development, there's a lot of work that should have went on before it was even made public. There's a lot of precautions that could have been taken that would have prevented this disclosure, and it would have made it so that we're not even making this video right now. It's not a news topic. Their information isn't posted to X and, nowhere else. But unfortunately, with this kind of setup where we're going to have all these different markets, we're going to have some who are set up by people who are complete amateurs. And this is why, at the end of the day, I always harp on the fact that people should never set up darknet markets unless they very much know what they're doing. And when I say know what you're doing, you should also know what the punishments are for if you get caught. Because if you screw up and you're in that position where, now there's a bunch of federal agents breathing down your neck, you should know if they're telling you, oh, you're going to get 80,000 years, that you actually know the reality of what that is, because that should be part of your operational security going into it, is knowing what the potential blowback can be for doing something like this, which again is why I advise no one to actually make a market. No one should be out there creating darknet markets because it's inherently extremely dangerous, and I don't want to see you go to prison for that. If you're talented enough where you can build an entire site like this solo, then do it, and do it legitimately. Do it for pay for clearnet markets. Do it for pay for, markets that are on the clearnet, that you don't have to worry about, getting caught 3 years, 7 years later, having all your assets taken, being taken away from your family, losing your freedom. If you're married, probably, divorce rate in federal prison is really high. So you're going to lose a lot. And that's what I'm, essentially it's one of the things I'm trying to promote with this channel. There's always going to be people who are going to be darknet market admins or are going to sell drugs, going to buy drugs. it's unrealistic to even try to stop that. But I think it is realistic for us to talk about, if someone's doing something and they're doing it strictly for money, there's a lot better ways to make money nowadays. Basically, the feds, what they want is they want the ability to give you 1,000,000 years for doing things like this. So the best thing you can do is not do what they want you to do. And therefore, you'll never be in a position where you're making 12 cents an hour and you're forced to work or go to shoe. That's what I would like to, see not happen. That's what I'd like to see my viewers avoid when they watch these videos. And that's hopefully what you get out of them is, the motivation to not do these kind of, things and make these kind of, be one of the people that I end up talking about here, or, elsewhere. Thank you guys for listening. I hope you enjoyed, and I'd love to hear what you all think of this particular situation, this ridiculous darknet market with no OpSec. Leave your comments below, and I'll try to respond to them. I'm also trying to concentrate on video production, so I know I haven't been as responsive lately to the comments section, but definitely leave your comments on a slow day or when I get to publish a good amount of content, then I'll come back and I'll try to get back to them. Thank you guys for watching this far, and if you haven't already, like and subscribe if you enjoy it, if you got value out of this content, and I'll see you in the next video.